Hello, my Kindred friends. This is Christian from the design team. I want to show you something. I want to know, are you a collector or a creator? Or do you want to become a creator from being a collector? There's no judgment here. These are just three of my totes of my Kindred stamp stuff, and there's three more that are just kind of hanging out on the side. They just didn't fit on the screen. Today, I want to challenge you to transition from being a collector to a creator. We will be making two projects today with the Pixie Dust stamp set. These two projects are going to help us overcome two fears. One, getting a dirty looking stamp because we got it a little inky. And two, we're not going to do any coloring. So let's break it down. First, we're going to start with a small project, a simple tag. Making a tag is one way that you can build your confidence in what you're doing. We will be using the card basic dies to make the hole for our tag. In my example, I am going to use colors that match the theme of my card. These 1/4-inch strips will give the illusion of the scene and the colors that you see in your brain when you see your stamp set. Once I had my colors all organized because OCD, I couldn't leave them mumble jumbled. It happens. You just got to accept it. I pulled out a piece of copy paper. I chose copy paper because I wanted a lightweight paper that I could put my little strips of paper on. I did use a double-sided adhesive to cover that A2 size panel. I knew I would be cutting this down and layering it on another piece of cardstock. So my paper on the tag that I was going to be cutting through will be very thick. So I wanted something thin to place this on to achieve the look that I was going for. If you do not have double-sided adhesive sheets, you can use a tape runner or even your liquid glue and just arrange your strips in an order that looks pleasant to your eye. This is your creation. One of the biggest fears I think people have when we are trying to change from a collector to a creator is the comparison, because comparison is a joy stealer. You should not be concerned about if your card looks exactly like my card or if your design looks exactly like the picture that you saw online someplace. This is your art, your interpretation. It's so easy to compare yourself to someone else. Don't let someone else have control of your joy. You have that control. And I think that's one of the biggest things as a creator you learn to embrace. With our joy intact, we are going to talk about what am I doing here? I am just aligning these strips of paper at a diagonal because I know I cannot make a straight line if someone paid me to. I would try my hardest, but I would never win that lottery. So I put it at an angle so that I know that it's going to look good no matter what. It's just something I've learned about myself and I can't change it, so I might as well embrace it. Once I have my strips adhered to the paper, I am going to burnish them and make sure that they're stuck really tight. Now I have a full panel of stripies that I will be able to use on my tags. We will only be demonstrating one tag during the video, but I'll show you two other tags that I made using the leftovers from this piece of paper. Your tag can be any size that you want it to be. My tag was 3 pieces of scrap paper that were all kind of measured to the same dimensions, around 3 inches. So I figured might as well embrace it and just use that as the size of my tag. Gave me plenty of room to decorate and to be able to have my image be seen clearly. I cut down my striped pattern paper to a 3-inch strip. I then harnessed those stripes at an angle for my design itself. This is a great way to have a design element that really stands out with minimal work. I will set aside those two other pieces of my striped paper and start to work on the assembly of my tag. Because I need to know where I'm going to cut out my flags at the bottom of the tag, I will adhere my striped paper to the tag itself. When the glue has dried, I pull out the card basic dies. I will be utilizing the square from inside of this die set. This will provide those little pennant flags. I don't know what those little points are called on the bottom of the tag. To do this, you can just eyeball it and wing it, or you can find the center of your tag, put a little mark where you need to have your points aligned, and then tape down your die to your tag with that being the center. With my center found, everything taped down, I went ahead and cut out the triangle section of the tag. Since my machine was out, I also decided that it was time to make my little hole that we need for putting our string through to have a hanging tag. To do this, I pulled out the star. I ran this through my machine the first time to cut through just the top layer of the cardstock. Then with a craft knife, remove that top layer because again, I'm going through multiple layers of paper here. I had the cardstock, the copy paper, and then whatever thickness of cardstock that I pulled out of my scrap bin for making this tag. The die was lined up, run through the machine again, and voila, I had my hole, well, I had a star hole for my tag. With my tag layout determined, it was now time to add my sentiment to the tag. And remember I said we are not using colored ink because we are preserving these stamps. We are not getting them inky yet. That'll be next month. So I chose a sentiment from the stamp set that I felt was appropriate for this tag. I arranged it on my stamping platform. I am using a MISTI in this example. I strongly recommend using some type of a stamping platform for this next part of our process. We will be using watermark ink. This is embossing ink that is nice and sticky, and sometimes you need to apply more than one coat. Because I live in Wisconsin and it's negative temperatures outside, which means zero humidity, I made sure that I used a lot of anti-static powder because it will make your life a lot easier. The color will come from the Emerald City embossing powder. This is a nice, bright, true green color with sparkles in it. Once the embossing powder was heat set, I did just set it aside to hang out and flatten out a little bit from any warping that may have occurred to actually make the element that we will place on top of our tag with our character from the stamp set. Pulling out my scrap papers, these are just leftover pieces from when I make 5x7 card bases or A6 card bases, dependent. It's just a pile of scrap paper. I did the same thing. I put an exuberant amount of anti-static powder onto the piece of paper. Then I stamped the image multiple times with the watermark ink. And finally, embossing powder was applied. You will notice that when I do my heat embossing, I start from the bottom of the cardstock with my tool. I do not come from above. I do this for a couple reasons. One, static electricity. I don't need to help blowing any of those little embossing particles everywhere, so I come from below. Two, I'm using a glitter-based embossing powder. This has more texture to it than standard fine embossing powder. So by heating it from the bottom and starting that melting process, the embossing powder will stick to each other and they will start to do their melting. Then you can go to the top to finish off that design or finish off the melting of the embossing powder. This will give you a cleaner, crisper, and image or lines compared to attacking from above. When you attack from above, again, you're blowing air and it's going to blow those little particles all over the place. And then you're going to get mad because you're going to have specks where you didn't want specks and it's just frustrating. So do it from the bottom, make your life easier. Once the embossing powder had cooled, I went ahead and fussy cut this out. If you have dies, great. If you have a scan and cut, great, use it. If you have another device that you can do cut files on, go ahead and do that. I just found it easier to pull out a pair of scissors and hope for the best. When I do my fussy cutting, you will notice my scissors really don't move. It's the piece of paper that moves. This will give you a smoother cutout line on your little character that you are cutting out. To finish the tag, I applied a large amount of foam tape to the back of my little flying friend here because it's a tag. It can have dimension. It's not going in the mail. I don't have to worry about extra postage for this one. And then what tag would not be complete with a little bling on it? Use the same principles as if you were making a card for your tags. Just arrange things in a way that looks nice to your eye. Your eye does not lie to you. A lot of times when we are comparing ourselves to others, we're like, wow, they know exactly where to put them. That looks so great. And then when we try to do it, when we try to copy them, it doesn't look the same and we get mad and we get frustrated. Go with what looks right for your eye. You're the artist on this. This is your design. You have the control. You make it awesome. And just like that, we have a tag made from a stamp set that I never touched before because I was collecting it instead of using it. Let's talk about what we're going to do next. We're going to step this up a little bit. Another great way for us to use a stamp without getting it dirty and without coloring is by doing a little tone on tone embossing powder and paper. So let's let this magic begin. On a piece of green cardstock, I took each of the images from the Pixie Dust stamp set and arranged them on the card itself, centering the character that I wanted to be the highlight of this card. The other images were arranged going off the paper in all different areas. I knew that this piece of paper was going to be trimmed down to be a little bit smaller. So I am not concerned if the images are not aligned perfectly. I will do the same thing we did on our tag. This piece of paper will be prepped with the anti-static powder. And again, a lot of it because I am going to be stamping all these images at one time and wanting to make sure I have powder coverage on all of them. The images themselves will be stamped multiple times. This is to ensure that I have complete coverage. The nice thing about having the anti-static powder on your cardstock is you will be able to see where that embossing powder is. Sometimes this does not show up so nicely in camera, but I am hopeful that you can see it on this example. The embossing powder was applied and then heat set in the same manner as we did for the tag. Once the embossing powder was cooled, I took off a 1/4 inch total from the card panel. I took this from multiple sides until I was comfortable with the way that the image was centered. The card panel was buffed to remove any leftover residue from the anti-static tool. I then brought in some green ink to give a halo effect or a spotlight effect on my card. I pulled that color in from the outsides to the insides, keeping the tone darker on the outside and less in the center. With my card panel ready and after a little cleanup, I was ready to make an interactive card. Yes, you can make an interactive card without having to color. We are going to make a shaker card. This shaker card is very simple. As a collector, I know you probably have it in your stash just as much as I have it in my stash, some packaging. There are many different ways that you can make a shaker. In this shaker card, I am going to be utilizing my card panel that is cut down smaller than my card base. This will allow me to have a border around my card. You can do an entire full face shaker panel in the same process as well. When you are setting up your shaker, you want to make sure your acetate is just a little bit bigger than your shaker panel itself. With a strong double-sided adhesive, you will adhere the acetate to the card panel on 3 of the sides that you have the tape. This will allow you to have an envelope that you can then fill with any pixie dust or sparkles that you want. To close your packet, you're just going to remove that double-sided tape and adhere that acetate down. And just like that, you now have a shaker element. This element, like I said, was going to be adhered to the card base with a couple different layers underneath it. I wanted to bring in some more colors that matched the theme of my card. To adhere my shaker pack to my panels, I did apply more strong adhesive, making sure that I covered over those areas where the acetate had folded back and was adhered. To buy myself some time to line things up properly, I did use a liquid adhesive just to have that extra wiggle room. The front panel of the card was adhered to a top folding card base, and it was time to work on the sentiment. The sentiment was prepared just like we did for all the other parts of our heat embossing. The piece of paper was prepped with anti-static tool, watermark ink applied, embossing powder applied, heat set, and buffed clean. The sentiment was then layered on the same colored cardstock as I did for the backing of the card panel. And the card's complete. We went from being a collector to a creator. We didn't have any stain on our stamps. We didn't color. I think we nailed it. We were able to make 3 tags and an interactive card just by doing a little heat embossing. I challenge you this month. I want you to be in control of your joy. Do not compare anymore. And also pull out one of those stamp sets that you haven't used in a long time or is never been used. Ink it up. See what you can make. You can become a creator. And when we meet next month, we're going to put some dark ink on our stamps. Oh, Lordy. And we're going to do some simple coloring. Yes, you can do coloring. Until next time, my friends.